You're about to listen to a BBC podcast, and trust me, you'll get there in a moment. But if you're a comedy fan, I'd really like to tell you a bit about what we do. I'm Julia Mackenzie, and I commission comedy podcasts at the BBC. It's a bit of a dream job, really. Comedy is a fantastic, joyous thing to do because really you're making people laugh, making people's days a bit better, helping them process all manner of things. But, I also know that comedy is really subjective and everyone has different tastes. So we've got a huge range of comedy on offer, from satire to silly, shocking to soothing, profound to just general prattling about. So if you fancy a laugh, find your next comedy at BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, your daily dose of news, analysis and insight. It's Monday the 4th of December and coming up today, despite this...
O'Reilly into the box, is going to shoot with the right foot. Oh, it's sensational! It's utterly sensational from Matt O'Reilly!
We'll hear why Brendan Rodgers was absolutely incandescent in Perth.
I'm still a little bit angry, if I'm honest. Never been so angry at half-time since I was a manager.
We'll also assess wins for Rangers and Hibs.
Here's a chance though for Seema to make it two, and he does! To shut the back post!
And have you booked your flight yet?
Yeah, Magic Glastonbury or McGinn in Kelsinkirchen. I think, there could be a mysterious illness happening at some point there.
We reflect on the Euro 2024 campaign and discuss the scramble for tickets. We'll also, of course, be talking about that draw.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Plenty to get through today then, and joining me for this edition of the Scottish Football Podcast, very delighted to say that BBC Entertainment correspondent Colin Paterson is with us, as is BBC Scotland commentator Thomas Duncan. Colin, are you well?
I'm very well. What a weekend that has been. My knowledge of German geography is so much better than it was around 4 o'clock on Saturday.
Absolutely, it's through the roof. And Thomas, how is yours? How is your Hungarian and Swiss knowledge as well?
Yeah, I probably need to brush up on that. Dominic Szoboszlai, that's it. There we go. Liverpool's midfielder for Hungary. But it's huge excitement. It was just great to be part of a draw, because even the last time we were there, we weren't Scotland weren't in the draw in a sense, because we were just playoff winner C. So it was great to just have our little flag and our name in a pot, and the excitement's just going to build and build and build from here. So yeah, what a weekend! Lots
more from Colin and Thomas to come, but first let's absolutely batter through this morning's headlines. There's no change at the top of the Scottish Premiership after both Celtic and Rangers won yesterday. Celtic came from behind to beat St Johnstone 3-1 in Perth after Brendan Rodgers read the riot act at half-time. Rangers ran out 2-0 winners over St Mirren at Ibrox with a double from new dad, Abdullah Sima. And Hibs defeated Aberdeen by the same scoreline at Easter Road for their third win in a row. The Daily Record are reporting this morning that plastic pitches could be banned in the Premiership from next season, with discussions scheduled between clubs in the new year. And Scotland have scrapped plans for a pre-Euro 2024 friendly against Switzerland after being drawn against them at the tournament on Saturday.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast with Amy Canavan.
Then where else could we start this morning other than that Euro 2024 draw on Saturday? Thomas was alluding to it earlier, Colin, that it was just absolutely fantastic to be in the draw, see our name, see our flag. Colin, it's the dream draw kicking it all off, isn't it?
It's fantastic. The shades of 98 when we got to do it against Brazil at the France World Cup then. I went to that World Cup. That's when I got my taste for following Scotland abroad. But the only problem of getting the first game in the group is tickets are so hard to come by. And I am still slightly bitter that I only ever got to go to the Norway and Morocco games in that World Cup. I just could not get one for the Brazil one. And do you know what? When you look at this is what's going to happen, is celebrity Scots who have a vague interest in football are all going to be at that game, and it is going to make my blood boil. I would like to have the roll call of shame of celebrities who went to that Brazil game in the 98 World Cup. Ewan McGregor. I have never seen Ewan McGregor at another Scotland football match. Jackie Stewart, Sir Jackie Stewart, he was there. He was not there for 3-0 v Kazakhstan, I can tell you that. And you know this is going to be going on again.
And Colin, you mentioned it there that you were there in Kazakhstan. You've made your fair share of international trips with Scotland, not so much of late, but the fact that you were there in Kazakhstan, you trekked out to Mexico for a friendly as well, must just be all the sweeter, this campaign in general, getting the job done early. Yeah. And not having any of that drama.
In honour of this appearance, I've actually totted up my Scotland away trips. It's not a good record. 36 games, won 10, drawn 5, lost 21. I mean, there's a lot of harsh nights there. And some of those wins were like Liechtenstein and San Marino as well. But so that is the absolute joy that we had so long to look forward to this tournament. Just the joy. I remember when we got back in the Euros for 2021, I couldn't quite believe it that we were in a Panini album. And it was like, wow, Scotland actually exists in sticker form. This has not been the case for more than 20 years. And I think, it's just fantastic that a new generation of Scotland fans are getting used to Scotland qualifying for tournaments, because back when I got into it in the 90s, we were off the back of Italian. Well, we used to qualify for every World Cup when I was a kid, and it's been a far different occasion in the last 20 years, but now back-to-back Euros, and it does feel like there is momentum.
There really is, and this may seem a slight tangent and a slightly morbid question, but I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of insight into your funeral.
Oh gosh, this is true, yeah. I got married recently, which is why I've not been going to Scotland games as much as I would like to. But when I got married, my wife and myself made a will, and while we were having the call with the solicitor, she went, and do you have any requirements for your funeral? And I went, what do you mean? And she went, you can pick a song if you want. I went, for real? I always thought this was a joke. And she went, no. So it is now officially in my will that when I die at my funeral, I'm almost looking forward to it now, it will play We Have a Dream by the 1982 Scotland World Cup squad, because it's the only way I am going to get my mates to cry. And that song is played at weddings and all our reunions and what have you over the years. What a song. Hey, we get a squad single next year as well. There's another thing to look forward to. I just hope we get a big gun to do the single. I remember over the years I've interviewed Scottish acts and asked them if they ever would be interested. Franz Ferdinand wrote a Scotland song that has never been released, and I think it contains only one word, and that word is Scotland. So I quite like to hear that now, absolutely, if you got the chance. But come on, get someone like Calvin Harris just to do a song that is actually going to make people proud.
And just before we let you go, you're speaking about the great atmosphere that was had, the great time that you had in France. What are the plans for Germany next year? We mentioned that there will be a very, very tough scramble for tickets. You got any sort of insiders that you can tap in to try and get a ticket off?
Big things are that as soon as I looked at the draw, 2 big dates avoided. Because we are the opening game, I can get out and get back in time for my wife's birthday. And because we're in the earliest round of third round games, I can do it before I have to go to Glastonbury. Now, if Scotland make the last 16, things will get very tricky, because it could be a real clash between Madonna at Glastonbury and sort of Scotland and Gelsenkirchen or something like that. Yeah, Magic Glastonbury or McGinn in Gelsenkirchen. I think, there could be a mysterious illness happening at some point there. But yeah, it was just so exciting on Saturday night. We had sort of one mate whose job it was to do the flights, one mate who was to do the hotels, and you have to go back onto UEFA and try and get the tickets through there as well. I don't know anyone who has managed to get tickets through the UEFA website, apart from one guy who lives in Austria. So I think there's a cap for each country. You basically need a mate in a really unpopular country, like somewhere like Luxembourg or somewhere like that. And I think you might actually have a chance of getting tickets. But it was an exciting day. My life was very complicated on Saturday night because we had 3 families over for a Christmas do, and Polar Express was on, and I had to negotiate with 6 under 8-year-olds to turn off Polar Express so I could watch the draw. And it was not going down very well, even when I was pointing out that the man who plays the conductor was Tom Hanks and he supports a football club that Sean McGinn plays for, did not seem to interest under 8-year-olds. I don't know why. But yeah, the Polar Express and the Euro draw was the big clash on on Saturday night.
The trials and tribulations of a Scotland fan looking forward to Euro 2024 next year. Colin, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Colin Paterson, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Some cracking stories there from Colin Thomas. Right then, let's get back to yesterday's action. You were at McDermott Park for the early kick-off, Celtic coming from behind, as we say, to defeat St Johnstone. What did you make of the match overall? Game of two halves, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was actually. I quite enjoyed Brendan Rodgers' post-match. He kind of summed it up. He said he's as angry as he'd ever been. As a manager, which, he's taken charge of over 700 games, so must have been pretty angry, but probably no surprise because St Johnstone played really well first half. I think the jokes were being written when the St Johnstone team was announced because St Johnstone played without any strikers and the old Craig Levein 4-6-0 was getting banded about, but it worked really well. Dialang Jayesimi was outstanding, holding the ball up. He obviously forced the ball over the line for the opening goal. And although they weren't playing without a striker, I thought St Johnstone played some really good stuff. Dan Phillips in midfield was excellent, as was Matt Smith, Max Kucherevi. They kind of, when they did win the ball, they kept it really well and moved up the pitch. And Celtic started brightly enough, but then kind of tailed off and kind of were a bit slow and pedestrian, which I think they have been at times in recent domestic games. But then second half, Brendan Rodgers makes the change. He brings on Mikey Johnston, who's kind of come from nowhere in the last few games off the bench. And he was absolutely outstanding down the right. He was constantly running at Costello and getting balls into the box. And Celtic just lifted the whole tempo. Two outstanding goals from Callum McGregor and Matt O'Reilly as well. Especially O'Reilly's worked all the way from the back, and then that finish on his right foot, sensational. So Celtic just lifted it in the second half, and I felt sorry for St Johnstone by the end. They put so much in, but they were just struggling by the end, although could have nicked it, but for Joe Hart clawing that one from Jay Turner-Cook off the line. So yeah, cracking game, I have to say. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely, it was quite the game, and Brendan Rodgers' post-match comments really dominating. I don't think it would be being quite as angry as Brendan Rodgers, but I don't think Philippe Clement would have exactly been delighted with Rangers' win over St Mirren. A comfortable 2-0 game as it was. Quite a contrast for Todd Cantwell after his previous game. Played in his preferred position, grabbed 2 assists. He's still a bit of a conundrum, isn't he? It's quite confusing for Philippe Clement right now. He doesn't quite know how to get the very, very best out of him, because that second assist in particular, you could really, that is Todd Cantwell at his absolute best, but there were absolutely some frustrating moments throughout the game from him.
Yeah, I think the manager probably, he was trying to prove a point to the manager. You play me in my best position. This is what I can do. Set up goals for you. No doubt he's a talented player, but I think Philippe Clement, obviously the big call on Thursday to take him off in the first half. But I think one thing you can sense from Philippe Clement is he's not really a man to be messed with. And if he asks you to play out of position and you don't follow instructions, then he was sending out a message to the whole squad that I don't care how good you are or who you are, if you don't do what I say, then you'll be made an example of. And obviously, I think the key thing with doing that to a player is you don't hold a grudge. The next game, you treat it on its own merits, which he did. They brought Todd Cantwell, started him again, and he played well. So yeah, Rangers on the whole probably not at their best, but I feel like Philippe Clement is just trying to, obviously the League Cup final is absolutely huge, and that is a big, big target for them. To win a trophy would be incredible and just kind of maybe lift their season. But I think he'll be desperate as well to get through to the winter breaks. He's made a few comments about fitness and things, and I just sense there's so limited time on the training ground for him, with so many games, Europe to juggle. I just sense that he'll be keen to get to January, maybe make a few signings, and also get the squad on the training ground and really drilling down into what he wants, and then to hopefully, from his point of view, set them up for a successful second half of the season.
Absolutely, you do, as Philippe Clement says, even if that means sleeping in the spare bedroom. You were speaking there, Thomas, about the League Cup final. Rangers will, of course, face Aberdeen, who created a plethora of chances against Hibs yesterday, but they still lost 2-0. That's them down to 10th, just 3 points ahead of bottom club Livingston. I know you were in a very, very, very cold Helsinki last week. Do you get the sense that Barry Robson is under a little bit of pressure? What's the state of play with the Dons right now?
I don't think he's under any pressure at the club. No, definitely not. I think that they backed him, and I don't think he's under any threat of losing his job. I think the fans would probably have a different view. Some fans, I think December's a huge month for him. He's been going on about the fixtures, which I think, at the start of the season when he was going on about that, I think people were growing tired of it. But actually, he's been mentioning it recently, and he's got a very valid point that they've had 7 of 8 games on the road against really tough opposition: PAOK, Helsinki, Celtic. The one home game they've had was against Rangers. So actually, I think people can have a lot of sympathy for him with that run. But now they've got 6 games out of their next 8 are at home. They've got Kilmarnock on Wednesday. They've got Hearts coming up at home, St Mirren coming up at home. They've got an away game against Dundee, the cup final. And I think really it's a defining period for Aberdeen's season and Barry Robson, because that's the test, I think, when the excuses of the away games and the fixture pile up potentially are taken away. If they don't pick up results and start moving up the league, then fans in particular will continue to grow restless. But the irony is they could continue to struggle in the Premiership and win a cup, and then what do you do? So I think I think Aberdeen have had a really, really tough run, and I think now is the time where they can try and show that they're a good team, because I think they had an expected goals of over 3 yesterday, which is pretty much unheard of in the Premiership to not score a goal. So I think they were unlucky, but you can only say you're unlucky for so long before people say they've had enough of that. So we'll see what happens. Huge month ahead for Aberdeen, I think, but good win for Hibs as well. You've got to say that's a couple in a row now, and they're moving up the table, and Nick Montgomery's got them playing some nice stuff. Obviously they rode their luck a bit, but them and Hearts are starting to move into a good position, which only adds to the pressure on Aberdeen, you have to say, as they kind of struggle to get themselves up the league. So yeah, big win for Hibs.
You're listening to the Scottish Football Podcast.
And speaking of tough runs of late, Thomas and I will both be at Hampden tomorrow as Scotland women's national team take on England in their final UEFA Women's Nations League match. Now, they already have been resigned to relegation. They will be plying their trade in League B the next time the tournament comes around. Liam McLeod will discuss the game more on tomorrow's podcast with former Scotland international Susanna Lappin. But just quickly, Thomas, it's been a tough one, hasn't it? It's been a very, very tough time for Scotland. I've been at every single game. What are the chances, do you reckon, of Scotland ending on a little bit of a high and just getting one over on England?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. There's no question about that. But they did play well down in Sunderland, as you know, Amy, you were there, and lost 2-1 to England. But I think England have struggled a bit since they come down from the World Cup. And they've obviously had a few injuries, but they would have expected to win this group comfortably. Maybe not comfortably, because the Netherlands are a good team, but they obviously lost to Belgium, which was a big surprise. Lost 1 to the Netherlands as well. Great comeback the other night, of course, but I don't think they are firing on all cylinders. So that's an opportunity for Scotland, especially at home. I just hope there's a big crowd there, because one thing I've noticed, in this campaign, that the home crowds haven't been great, which makes it difficult for the players in a 50,000-seater stadium. I think it can be a bit flat at times. I think the players deserve backing, especially in a big game like this. And I think they're due a big performance and a big result against a good side, because it's been a while since the Scotland women's national team, I think, won a game that you wouldn't expect them to win, where they've made a statement and they've kind of turned the odds, and you go, wow, what a result that was. It's been a long time. So you're not guaranteed anything, but I feel like they're due a big performance, and hopefully it comes tomorrow night and they do themselves justice. But England have got threats all over the pitch, so it's going to be extremely difficult, and they've got something to play for as well, because they want to win this section. Obviously they need the Dutch to slip up against Belgium, but and there's also the added dynamic of potential Scotland players denying themselves the chance to play at the Olympics, which is kind of thrown in there for good measure. But obviously I think they've got to put that to one side and focus on the game. But it should be a big occasion. As I say, I hope the crowd befits the occasion. Scotland against England at Hampden, a competitive game and plenty to play for.
Absolutely. Get yourselves along to Hampden tomorrow if you can. If you don't make it to the game, you can tune in to BBC Radio Scotland for full live commentary from the dulcet tones of Thomas Duncan, or if not, you can watch the game live on BBC One from 7:30 on Tuesday. That's all we've got time for today. My many thanks to Thomas Duncan and Colin Paterson, and thank you, of course, for listening. Keep in touch with your comments and questions if you've got your tickets for Euro 2024. Tell us how you've managed to do it. Thomas and I would like tips, what your plans are. Our email address is scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk. And remember, you can get us wherever you get your podcasts. So if you haven't done so already, do just search for the Scottish Football Podcast and hit subscribe. For now, take care and bye-bye.
Just a quick reminder, the Behind the Goals podcast is available every Tuesday with me, Rachel Corsey, and me, Leanne Crichton. It's your one-stop shop for our take on everything that's happening in the world of football. Just head to BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts and search for Behind the Goals.